This Racing Life with Albasti Equiworld, the leading supplier of horse feeds and supplements.
Welcome to the latest episode of This Racing Life, where we head to Lambourn in the sunshine. First up, we forage our way to Lambourn Woodlands, a mile outside Lambourn, where last season's Champion Stakes winning trainer Owen Burrows has made a strong start to his campaign. Since becoming an independent trainer in 2021, he hasn't looked back and attributes much of his success to a firm grounding. We went to talk to him at his base in Farncombe Stables, a state-of-the-art training facility.
It's now 4 seasons since you moved here in what was originally supposed to be a rehab centre, but is now a proper training facility.
It is, yes. We, very fortunate to move over to here, and thankfully when Shadwell built it, they built it sort of 40 stables, knowing full well that they'd never need that many. We've added another 11 now, so we can take sort of just over 50 on site, but it's such a good yard to work from. We've got a 10-bay oval horse walker there. The gallops are just at the back of the gate there. We've got a spa, the indoor barn there where they warm up. So yeah, look, it's a great site. 3-year-old was second at Lingfield last week. Ali and Arby, he goes to Haydock a week Saturday. Got a nice Blue Point colt, had one run, finished second at Wolverhampton at the back end. It was a bit of an eye catcher. Obviously I'm very fortunate that Shadwell still supported me very well. Sheikh Ahmed's been a big supporter. Ahmed El Sheikh, very good, sent me horses that first season. So look, it's, we've got sort of mid-60s on the books now. As I touched on, we can take 50. So yeah, it's going well. It's blooming competitive. Everybody is sort of, after more horses. I'd say even the biggest yards in the country don't turn a horse away, So it's tough, but I can't complain, put it that way.
And it must have been a big fillip for you, I suppose, with the Shadwell operation reducing massively after Sheikh Hamdan passed away, that they still, Sheikha Hissa, decided to send you horses.
Oh, massively, like that. We were very lucky as such that, I've got a lot to owe Huckham for, because he won the City of Gold in Dubai the year after Sheikh Hamdan passed away, and then, won the coronation. Obviously picked up an injury, but, he come back the following year, won the King George, and, Minzel sort of won the Sprint Cup. Anmart's done his bit as well, so yeah, it's I'm very thankful to Shadwell, because obviously they own the yard still. I rent the yard from them. They've been very good with the transition with me going public, so I've got a lot to be very grateful to them.
And I guess it's just a bit of a shame that Sheikh Hamdan wasn't around to see all those successes you just mentioned.
Yeah, look, that's we touched on it earlier. I've got sort of 2 regrets as such. That I lost my father sort of 8 years ago now in sort of September, and obviously Sheikh Hamdan has not been about to see all this success that we've had the last few years. So look, I'm sure he's looking down, as they both are, I dare say, and hopefully very proud, and thankfully it's helped me as such with Shadwell continuing to support us very well. Just after a classic now would be nice, but when that will come, we'll see. The grass hasn't been used for nearly 2 months, but 2 main grass gallops are down, the first 2 down, and then we've got 6 furlong all weather here, which is a Martin Collins track. But then this has been built, the wood chip. This was the last sort of big project Sheikh Hamdan did for me before he passed away.
And we've been on your amazing, quiet, serene, beautiful gallops this morning, and I asked you when we went out there, how many trainers do you share this with, Owen? And you said, it's just mine.
Exactly, yeah. Look, we're very lucky that we don't have to get up at the crack of dawn to be getting on the best ground. Look, it comes at a cost. It's we have sort of machines and fuel, and I have to employ a gallop man. But yeah, I'd rather have it that way. It's, obviously I know, spent many years in Newmarket, and fighting to get the best strip of ground up the Limeys there could be you know, I've spent many a morning driving up the high street, and people are still only just getting in taxis to go home, and we're going to work. So yeah, there's none of that now, thankfully.
I was going to ask you, how does it compare Lambourn to Newmarket? Because obviously you spent over a decade as assistant to Sir Michael Stoute, and we all know it can get pretty hectic at Newmarket, but here it's nice and breezy, nice and airy. There's loads of space to roam around in.
Yeah, look, it's you know, it's a very relaxing environment, and you know, a few of my owners who've had horses in Newmarket, you know, much prefer down here. It's, you know, such a nice quiet walk back. You walk back down the valley, and you know, it's such a, you know, mentally it's very good for horses. And you know, we have a dozen turnout paddocks on top of the hill there, which again is great to get them out for a few hours. So yeah, look, we're very, very lucky. It's a you know, proper spot.
And do you find that the education that you had with Sir Michael, you've brought some of those lessons with you to here where you are now?
Certainly. You know, I think, you know, people would sort of class me as quite a patient trainer, and obviously very lucky that, you know, you need owners who are patient with you. And yeah, I'd like to think we can still train a 2-year-old. You know, Minzo won the Gymcrack for us, so just depends what sort of horses you get sent. The last couple of years they've needed a bit of time, my 2-year-olds, but you know, I'll be honest, we're working a handful now, and I'd, you know, like to think we'll have a couple of runners shortly, middle of May time. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
No, I think so.
All right. Yeah.
That's what I assume.
Yeah. Okay. All right, John. Yeah.
Oh, and you mentioned that two of your regrets that Sheikh Hamdan wasn't around to see some of your success, and your dad as well. Let's start by talking about your dad. Was he a big supporter of yours from the beginning?
Look, yeah, massively. He, you know, it was through my dad as such that I got into racing. You know, he was, you know, he was sort of a racing guy himself. He worked for Major Tim Foster before I was born, and because I was born in Wantage, so reasonably local. But then he spent many years as head lad for David Nicholson right through the 80s. You know, yeah, jumping wise, that was, he enjoyed the flat, but not as much as the jumping. But then, yeah, once I got to Sir Michael's, and you know, he spent a lot more time following the flat horses. And yeah, he sort of had the 1 year when I was training. He used to love to jump in the car and come racing with me, and yeah, that's, as I say, that's the one regret. I'd have loved to have, you know, him to still been about, and sort of seeing the success that we've had over the last few years.
And it's interesting that he was more of a jumps man, but you've decided to go down the flat route.
Yeah, so look, that was probably circumstances as such that, you know, I rode for 7 years, I think, and look, I was pretty average. I rode 43 winners, I think, had about 500 rides, but I got to the point where I wasn't really going to make a living from it. You know, I'll be honest, I was a bit of a loose end when I packed in. I went to live with my brother in Jersey for the summer, and I had a few contacts over there, so rode over there, and then, you know, got to the end of the summer, end of August time, and I was like, right, what am I going to do, type of thing. So I went and lodged with Roger and another guy, Paul, who was sort of down at Gifford's with us in Newmarket, and was riding out for Sean Woods originally. Sean was Philip Hyde's brother-in-law, so I'd actually had a ride for Sean.
It seems like Sean's been around since the 1800s.
Well, like,
in a way, doesn't it?
Interestingly, again, his assistant left at the end of that summer. He offered it to me, which I jumped at the chance, because it was hard work at Sean's, but it was good fun. You know, you'd sort of ride 3 or 4 lots, but yeah, I really liked Sean. He was a good fun guy to work for. But then obviously was all the way through the end of that season and through the winter, breaking in the yearlings, etc. And then he obviously had his offer to go and train in Hong Kong. So I'm like, oh, crikey, what's going to happen now? But again, fate's been very kind to me that Patrick Prendergast was just leaving Sir Michael's, and he, you know, fair play to Sean, he made sure every member of his staff had a job to go to before he left, and he put a good word into me at Stouties, and yeah, I started in there of March 02. And look, I used to ride 2 lots out to start with. I didn't immediately go in, but it was a role which developed, and look, I loved my time there. I was there March 02 and left in December 14.
What was Sir Michael like as a boss?
Oh, look, he good fun. He might not say too much to the press and stuff, but he was good fun. And like, look, he's another one. He could give a rollicking, and the boys, who'd been there a while, they said, oh, he's mellowed a fair bit now. So I wouldn't have wanted to sit him sort of 10, 15 years before. But, I was on the end of one or two of those over the years. But yeah, look, he was a real good guy. I think you could see a lot of the staff had been there for years with him, But he wasn't one of those who would say to you why he was doing something. You had to sort of just pick it up and understand then. And you could ask questions, but you wouldn't want to be annoying him. Put it that way. You'd have to pick your moments.
And at the time you were there, you did go through a period of pretty, well, not an embarrassment of riches, but certainly some very good horses, the likes of Workforce, Harbinger, others as well, that Chris Kinn, another one. There was a lot going on.
Exactly. I was very fortunate. 3 Derby winners, numerous Breeders' Cup winners. Russian Rhythm won the 1,000 guineas. Islington, Conduit, Ledger winner. As you touched on, Workforce won the Arc. It was just incredible to look back, and you sort of half expected it though. Every year you were expecting sort of group horses to appear, and near enough they did.
And this is going to be a career best for Hookham. Hookham right away and wins the Derby Coronation Cup.
And you mentioned that you got to know Sheikh Hamdan a bit when you were at Sir Michael's, particularly towards the end. And I guess your relationship there was part of the reason why you became retained trainer to Shadwell itself. Yeah,
so again, through tragic circumstances, obviously John Hills was training a few for Sheikh Hamdan up at Kingwood, and obviously Marcus had been at Kingwood, and he took over from the Major, and just one thing and another sort of, I don't know, it lost sort of favour as such a little bit, Kingwood, but then with Sheikh Hamdan having horses with John, I think he got a bit more of the bug again for Kingwood, and obviously it's tragic that John passed away, and obviously Barry took the licence over, and he said, look, I can do it for another 12 months, but I'm not looking to carry on training. I've done my bit and retired, and so look, I was sort of approached and asked if I'd be interested, and I did speak to Sir Michael straight away, and just what his thoughts were, and he said, you won't get an opportunity like this if you want to train, then that's so look, I jumped at the chance, and
that's rather nice of Sir Michael to say that, though.
Oh, massively, yeah. Look, I thought I didn't want to look as if I was going behind his back or anything, and I wanted to see what he thought, so yeah, he was very good, and yeah, I had the sort of year 2015 under Barry, and yeah, started myself in 2016.
How much pressure did you feel going into that job?
You expect to train winners, simple as. Yeah. You're getting sent, I think I had sort of 40, 50 my first year, then it went to sort of 70 odd, and then I think the third year, you're nearly 90 something horses I trained, and
that kind of exponential growth brings a lot of expectation.
Oh, of course it does, yeah, exactly. And he was sort of spending good money on yearlings and supporting us, a lot of homebreds, and yeah, it took me a while to get to grips with the gallops as such.
How come? Is it very different?
Just look at it, we're all sort of what you get used to, and that works. You have to, and I'll admit, I come down here and you sort of look at my all-weather. It's a little bit longer than Warren Hill, but we use it quite similar, 2 canters, etc. The bottom gallop, my valley gallop, is 9 furlongs, so you possibly try and use that like the round gallop on the limeys, and just little bits and pieces like that. But it's all different, and it's different soil. We're on chalk here, it's old downland, and it's different to what the limeys are.
Anmart is staying on, so too See the Fire can land again in Anmart as they race to the line, and Anmart is getting up for Shadwell to win the Kipco Champion.
That Champion Stakes was some watch, I think, for everyone in the public, seeing that extraordinary race unfold.
Yeah, it was enjoyable up to about turning in. Then I had about a furlong where I could have jumped off the stands, and then suddenly, like the last half a furlong, it was very enjoyable again. but look, he's an absolute star, you know, and he has been, you know, he's been with us a few years now. So, you know, he went up through the handicap ranks, won the John Smiths, and, you know, went up through Group 2s and 3s, and, you know, won the Prix de l'Espagne there a couple of years ago, Group 1. You know, I fancied him for the Eclipse that year, and unfortunately he had sort of quite a complex foot injury. You know, but mentally to come back from that, you know, that was a heck of a sort of achievement by him and all my team and the team back home at Shadwell.
And what are the plans for him this season, race-wise?
So he'll either go to Ireland for the Tats Gold Cup, or he'll go back to France for the Prix d'Espagne. That's on the 25th of May. So, and then he had an entry for the Prince of Wales there last Tuesday, the Eclipse. Juddmonte, Irish champion, English champion. So, you know, we have mentioned possibly stepping him up. You know, perhaps might try the 1.5 miles, but we'll see how he does the first few races and see what he's telling us. If he's doing well, and you know, there'd probably be no need to. But yeah, we'll see.
Next up, we have come to a historic stable here in Lambourn, which has produced multiple Grand National winners down the years. But with the highs come the lows, and Harry Dunlop is part of a group hoping to change the perception around mental health amongst trainers.
Obviously I trained for quite a number of years, and at the end of my training career I became a member of the, as I say, the National Trainers Benevolent Fund, which is supported by the NTF, the National Trainers Federation, and basically we very much felt that we want to do something for more trainers, be more proactive. The charity was very much for something that really went wrong at the end for somebody, and we just wanted to be more proactive. And as you say, I think mental health is just so important within our industry. Horse racing is such a sort of cutting edge stress business. That's really where it came from.
And when you first thought about starting it, did you feel there was a real need to get something like this along the road?
Well, I was sadly approached by a trainer a couple of years ago who was clearly having a very tough time. I think firstly, you know, the horses weren't winning, and secondly, I think, you know, like all things in training, costs were biting a little bit. Everything was clearly against him, and I really felt there was no real support for trainers. There's a lot of support for stable staff, which is fantastic, and many other things. But trainers, I just felt were perhaps lacking, that we were always the ones that were supporting everybody else, and there was nobody really to support us. And that's really where my feeling was, to try and make this happen, and it's wonderful that it has.
There was a few years ago now that things were getting tough. I'd just lost a couple of lads that had taken their own lives, and maybe I took my mind off actually training the horses for a bit. And yeah, I actually got in touch with Michael Caulfield, and he came and sat down, had a cup of tea and had a chat, and yeah, we spoke about things, and it was really important because, you know, I've got a wife, and she's, you know, the time hit her as well, so I just felt, you know, I needed to go and have a chat, and it made a big difference.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it really very helpful to you?
It really was, because it's someone that, you know, I would know Michael a bit, but not a lot. And for someone who's outside of your, you know, the people you trust and love, etc., they, you know, it's a slightly different in how they tell you, and it can make a huge difference.
And I think one of the main points that Harry was getting across is that he wants it to become more well known, that trainers can come forward and speak to someone. And obviously you can't market this kind of thing, but it is important that it becomes better known, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so, because I think we all feel like when you're a trainer, it's not just about the horses. There is so much to think about. You're flat out the whole time generally, and you've got staff, and you might have a young family and a wife, and there's so much things to look at. Sometimes you don't actually take time to sort of think, you know, am I okay? Do I need a bit of help, etc. So it's just really important, you know, to be able to talk to someone to get, you know, help and advice.
And what would you say to trainers who are perhaps a little more afraid to come forward if you wanted to say, you know, there is support out there?
I just think that the main thing is that we're not trying to tell people to go to darkened rooms and have counselling. It's purely a conversation. It can be over a drink, it can be a walk or something like that. I mean, certainly Michael Caulfield, for instance, I know he people visit him and they go off for a walk with a dog and have a good chat. And I think sometimes it's good for any trainer when things aren't going very well. And it doesn't just have to be about the business either, also their sort of personal lives as well. I think please feel that you know, nobody's judging you, and I think you can only improve yourself.
Next up, we head just down the road from Roanhurst to Rodan Stables, passing both Jamie Osborne's and Stan Moore on the way, to a trainer whose career has spanned numerous decades, Mark Usher.
It was always a pull to come back down here, so when there was an opportunity to have a job with Henry Candy, I jumped at it really.
And I guess you got the taste for Lambourn with Barry Hills. What was it like working for him?
Well, it was a bit of a baptism of fire, truth be known, but yeah, coming straight out of school and working for Barry. But he knocked the sort of edges off you, and you know, it was a wonderful place. It was very exciting. I was there when I think Rheingold had just won the Arc the year before.
How did that come about in the first place? Did you just turn up to the yard? Or?
Well, good question. It was, I didn't really know what to do quite when I was leaving school, but there was an advert in like, Horse and Hound, the old thing, and stable staff wanted in Lambourn, BWH, and I applied for it.
And was it the taste for training that you got there?
Yes, I always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to train, but the opportunity wasn't there, neither were the finances. So I worked for Barry, I went up to Rob Armstrong, came back to Lambourn and worked for Henry for 3 years, and they were the great years of Time Charter, Wyndham Wuthering, you know, Moritz Fontaine. We had some wonderful years, and Henry had some very good horses and did very well with them when I was there.
Yeah, you mentioned Time Charter. She was some there, wasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, she was unbelievable. I remember we had a gallop up on one of his gallops in the spring. And bearing in mind that I think Wyndham Wuthering had won the Dewhurst by 7 lengths, and she completely quickened away from a Dewhurst winner like you couldn't believe. And I think Henry was a little bit annoyed with Steve Cawthon, to be honest with you. But Steve said, look, this is brilliant. And she was brilliant.
And from Henry's, you started out yourself in about mid-80s, is that right?
83, I think, when I first started. Got my licence towards the end of 83. That was a bit fortuitous, really, because I was quite friendly with Colin Brown, the jump jockey. He knew I wanted to train, really, and his brother-in-law was a guy called Tom Marshall. And Tom trained in Lambourn, son of Bill Marshall, and he wanted to pack it in, really. And so he introduced me, Colin, to Tom. And Tom was one of the kind of pioneers, along with people like Henry Ponsonby, with the partnership horses, do you know what I mean? So he had a few there he would keep with me. And so I hustled around and got a few quid, got a few owners, and bought some tack, got a licence, and off I went.
Am I right in thinking that you made a very fast start as well?
Yes, I was lucky. I mean, 2 of those horses that Tom had with me, one called Portagon, he was a good handicapper. I mean, he was my first ever winner at Thirsk, but he won a couple of 10 grand handicaps back in those days up at Ayr, do you know what I mean? And they were on the TV, on ITV, and then I had a filly that cost 1,000 quid called Mystery Ship, and she won the Sweet Solera my first year, do you know what I mean? So for a guy with 8, 9, 10 horses, I was the kind of new kid on the block, if you want.
I don't want to talk about retirement, but have you thought about potentially cutting off at some point?
Yes, I would. I mean, obviously, as I said to you earlier on the gallops, I mean, the pandemic was well, 2 things about it. When I came to Lambourn in 2000, we set up a lot of partnerships, okay? And I wouldn't say they're inflation-proof, but when the financial crash happened in 2007-8, we withstood that quite well, because, you know, if 12 people own or 10 people own a horse, you know, it's not such a big deal for them. Or some blokes got 2 or 3 horses in training, do you know what I mean? So you know, I didn't really realise that was a consequence, but that's what happened. And equally with the pandemic, I think there was, towards the end of it, there was a lot of, you know, say somebody's spending 3 or 4 grand a year on a share in a horse, do you know what I mean? There was a lot of unspent income, if you want, and because they hadn't been on holiday or they hadn't been spending, or they couldn't spend it on so much. So when we pushed at the end of the pandemic, there was a lot of appetite for people getting involved. So that the business side of it, which is ultimately the bottom line, survived better than you'd have thought. You know, I can't go on forever. I've got a son, Michael, who would probably be interested. He helps me out now and a bit at another yard we've got in Lambourn, rides out for Owen Burrows. So that might happen. We'll see how it goes, but you know, and some youthful sort of thoughts and enthusiasm, and you know, I mean, one thing you do find as you get older, I mean, travelling around the country is a lot harder. Do you know what I mean? And you know, working the yard and around the yard and going up and down the gallops is great. I find no problem at all. I enjoy that, but going racing all the time is a bit of a pain.
Our intrepid journey through the Lambourn countryside next takes us just a couple of houses down the road from Mark Usher to the yard of up-and-comer Tom Ward. Having learned from some of the finest minds in the game, Ward is now establishing himself as one of the area's most promising trainers.
Tom, it's been 4 years since the racing TV cameras were last here. At that point, White House Stables had just been built. Since then, how's the journey been for you?
It's been fantastic, yeah. We've been very fortunate to build our own place, and obviously we've been able to add things as and when we feel we can necessarily do them. But the place to me is beginning to feel obviously like home, and the horses seem very relaxed and settled, and they're really pleased.
And in terms of the facilities here, have they expanded since you first built it in 2021?
Keep expanding each year. We keep adding as and what we can. We've got some nice paddocks out the back now, got some lovely hose bays. The horses seem very relaxed here, and the barns, as we showed back in the day, are designed purely for health and light purposes, and they've done that. 40 horses in at the moment. We're definitely expanding on quality. We've got probably a similar number to the last couple of years, but we've definitely got a much stronger team, I think, to go to war with this year.
You mentioned quality. Is that something that you're focusing more on as you become more experienced as a trainer?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we all strive to be at the big meetings on the big days, and quality will hopefully allow you to be at in those positions. So at this stage, I'm delighted with what we've got, and I think I'm delighted with our 2-year-olds this year in terms of the pedigrees we've got coming through. So I'm really excited for the next few years. We've sold a fair amount of horses to Australia. They've all actually done very well, but obviously you'd love to have kept them here. I mean, one was Waterford, who I think actually ended up winning a Group 2 in Australia. We sold them after his first start, Newbury, third behind Bayside Boy. I thought, here we go, and then we got a good offer. So we've done particularly well with our lower budgets. So obviously I'm hoping the bigger budgets we hopefully will eventually get will allow us to buy bigger and better and stronger horses. But up to now, we've had 6 horses who've been through stakes performers, a few stakes winners, and I think we've sort of definitely batted above our head in terms of our quality and our results.
And in terms of budgeting, I know that you've got big plans for another barn being built hopefully fairly soon on the yard.
Exactly. So we've got 2 barns in the moment, and we've got another barn which will hopefully bring us up to around 70, 80 horses. But at this stage, really happy with the numbers we've got, but obviously I want to expand in quality rather than just expanding for the sake of expanding. No coughs? We'll scope her when you get back, Alice, all right? Just leave her tied up, okay? Kept up quite well.
As regards aims for this season, what are you trying to achieve over the course of the next few months?
Well, I think we've got some really progressive type of horses in the yard at the moment, especially our sort of 3- and 4-year-old divisions. They look some nice proper horses will hopefully take us to those big meetings. Obviously, we can all dream of going to Ascot and Glorious Goodwood and York, but we're definitely in the pipeline with a few horses to go in that direction. And then, like I said to you earlier, our 2-year-old quality is way up this year on pedigrees, and that will hopefully stand us in good stead for years to come.
And you've proven yourself at that high level, haven't you? With a couple of listed winners, performers at group level. You know you can do it, and you want to keep doing it.
No, exactly. And we've only ever had 3 runners at Royal Ascot, and 2 of them have been placed. So we're knocking on the door there as well. And if we could get one there, it'd be fantastic. But look, we're trying to be on the bigger table. We've got the horses hopefully to go to war with, and if they're fit and healthy and well, then that's half the battle to get them there.
That's it for another edition of This Racing Life, and we thank those who have taken part: Owen Burrows, Tom Ward, Mark Usher, Warren Greatrex and Harry Dunlop. Until next time, it's goodbye.